My name is Emily Carter, and most people who meet me now think I've always had it all together. They see the sharp blazer, the quiet confidence, the way I walk into a room and command it without raising my voice. They don't know how much silence I've learned to carry. This morning, I was sipping lukewarm coffee at my office desk when a photo notification slid across my phone screen. My stomach clenched before I even touched it. I knew that face, that background, my sister laughing under a sun umbrella on some beach abroad. The date stamped on the photo was the same week I buried my son. My throat tightened. I smoothed the sleeve of my silk blouse, the fabric whispering under my fingertips, trying to ground myself. Outside my window, the city gleamed like nothing had ever gone wrong, but inside me, the memory clawed fresh. They hadn't come. Not one of them. My family, my blood, had refused to stand with me when I lowered a white casket into the earth. They'd chosen cocktails and palm trees over grief. And now, years later, the world sees me as untouchable, polished, successful. But behind my composure is a mother who still aches, a woman who still remembers the sound of dirt hitting wood alone. The buzz of my phone pulled me back again. Another message. Another trigger. And with it, the truth I've kept hidden for far too long rose to the surface. The funeral day is seared into me like a burn that never quite heals. I remember standing at the church doors, clutching tissues I never used because tears wouldn't come. Grief had gone bone deep, past the point of release. My son, Michael, was only 10, too young to be spoken about in past tense. The pews were almost empty. A few neighbors came. My coworker, Janet, drove 3 hours to sit quietly in the back. But when I turned, scanning the aisle, the faces I longed for, my mother, my brothers, my sister, weren't there. Instead, my phone buzzed in my purse. A picture. My sister, Rachel, with a fruity drink in her hand, her smile wide. The caption, "Family Trip Vibes." I felt the ground tilt. For a moment, I thought I might collapse right there in my black heels. I wanted to scream, to demand why my child wasn't worth pausing their vacation. But instead, I pressed the phone against my chest, as if holding it closer could dull the knife. During the burial, when the priest's words faded into the air, I could hear the shovel scraping earth. The sound was heavy, final. My hands shook so badly, I had to lock them together. That's when I remembered something my grandmother once told me before she passed. Emily, life will not always hold you softly. Sometimes you'll have to hold yourself. She'd given me a silver locket when I was 16, tiny and unassuming, with the word endure etched inside. I wore it that day, under my dress, pressing it between my fingers as dirt thudded against my son's coffin. In that moment, I made a silent vow. If my family could mock my grief with laughter over cocktails, then I would never again beg them for love. Never again wait for them to show up. I kissed the locket, tucked it back against my skin, and stood straighter. Alone, yes, but not broken. Not forever. After the funeral, the silence in my apartment was unbearable. Michael's sneakers sat by the door, his school backpack still slouched against the wall. I couldn't bring myself to move them. For weeks, I walked around them as if he might need them again. Grief threatened to drown me, but something inside refused to sink. Maybe it was the locket pressed to my chest each night. Maybe it was the memory of his laugh, urging me not to fade. I had bills piling on the counter and no one to lean on. My parents made it clear I shouldn't call. My siblings never even sent flowers. So I did the only thing I could. I worked. I started small, taking on extra shifts at the marketing firm where I was an assistant. My boss, Linda Harris, noticed my hunger to learn. One night, after I stayed late designing a campaign mock-up, she stopped by my desk. "You've got an eye, Emily," she said, setting her coffee beside me. "Don't waste it. Push further." That single sentence became a lifeline. I pour myself into learning graphic design, digital strategy, anything that could sharpen my edge. Nights blurred into mornings, my fingers aching from hours at the keyboard. Some nights I cried at the desk, whispering Michael's name as I deleted failed drafts. But I kept going. My first break came when a small bakery owner took a chance on me to redesign her logo and online ads. I charged barely enough to cover rent, but when her business doubled traffic within weeks, she hugged me with tears in her eyes. That hug, it was the first time I'd felt needed since losing my son. Word spread. One client turned into 3, then 5. By the end of the year, I had enough side projects to file for my own business license. Linda, instead of seeing me as competition, became my mentor. She'd invite me to coffee shops and review my proposals, red pen in hand, teaching me how to sharpen every word, every pitch. There were nights I still lay awake staring at the ceiling, hearing my family's laughter in my head from those beach photos. The sting of abandonment didn't fade quickly. So I built my success quietly, never posting more than a neutral work update online, never giving them the satisfaction of seeing me rise. But behind the curtain, I was transforming. My small projects became campaigns for bigger brands. I hired a part-time assistant. Then 2. Then an entire team of designers. Within 5 years, I wasn't just surviving, I was running a thriving digital agency from a glass-walled office downtown. The city skyline glittered outside my window, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was glittering with it. Still, every night before locking up, I'd touch my grandmother's locket. Endure. It had carried me through the darkest hours, and now it reminded me I had endured. But I wasn't finished. Not yet. It happened on a Thursday afternoon, years after I'd buried Michael. I was reviewing a client pitch in my office when my receptionist buzzed in. "Emily, there are 3 people here asking for you. They say they're family." I froze. The word family hit me like ice water down my spine. For a second, I thought I'd misheard. But when I stepped into the lobby, there they were, my mother, my sister Rachel, and my brother David. Older, grayer, but unmistakably them. Rachel was the first to speak, adjusting her sunglasses like she owned the room. "Emily, wow. You look different." Different. That was her word. She couldn't even say strong, or successful, or alive. Just different. My mother wrung her hands, eyes darting to the marble floors, the sleek furniture, the art on the walls. "All carefully chosen, all mine. We thought we'd stop by while in town," she murmured, as if visiting me were some casual errand. I let the silence stretch. Years of abandonment weighed between us like smoke. Finally, I gestured for them to follow me into my office. Inside, sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting the city's skyline in sharp relief. A vase of fresh lilies sat on my desk, Michael's favorite flower. My leather chair gleamed behind the wide oak desk that bore my nameplate, Emily Carter, CEO. They all stared. I could almost hear the gears grinding in their heads. In their minds, I was supposed to be worn out, bitter, barely scraping by. Instead, I was sitting in the kind of office they'd only seen in glossy magazines. Rachel let out a laugh that sounded forced. "So, this is yours?" "Yes," I said simply. "Every inch of it." David blinked. "You mean you own this place?" "This whole agency." I met his gaze, without flinching. "I built it. From the ground up. While you were busy posting vacation photos." That shut him up. My mother finally spoke, her voice trembling. "Emily, we didn't know you were doing so well. We thought after Michael you'd..." She trailed off, not daring to finish. "Fall apart." I offered. "Disappear quietly? Maybe drink myself into oblivion so you wouldn't have to face me?" My voice was calm, but the edge in it sliced clean. Rachel shifted uncomfortably. "Look, we were on that trip months in advance. It wasn't personal." "Not personal?" My laugh was low, bitter. "You refused to come to my son's funeral. You left me standing there with an empty aisle. You mocked my grief with cocktails on the beach, and you want to tell me it wasn't personal?" The room thickened with silence. For once, they had no comeback. I leaned back in my chair, steepling my fingers. I buried my son alone, and when I rose from that ground, I swore I'd never need you again. "You see this office, this company, this life?" I gestured around us. "It exists because I endured, because I turned pain into steel. And while you laughed on a beach, I built an empire." Their faces were a mix of shock and shame. Rachel's bravado cracked, her eyes glistening though she tried to hide it. David stared at the floor. My mother whispered my name like a prayer. But I didn't let the silence soften me. I let them sit in it, taste it, feel the weight of what they had thrown away. Then finally I said, "Now you see me. Not the girl you abandoned. Not the sister you mocked. Not the daughter you dismissed. You see the woman who rose anyway." The power shift was complete. For the first time in my life, they were the ones speechless, and I was the one holding all the cards. I let the silence linger until it pressed heavy against the walls. For years, I had been the one shrinking under their judgment, aching for their approval. Now the roles had reversed. They were restless in their seats, waiting for me to decide what came next. Finally, I leaned forward. "You came here today because you want something. Don't bother denying it." Rachel opened her mouth, then shut it again. My mother's eyes welled. David cleared his throat. "We thought maybe we could reconnect. Start over." "Reconnect?" I tilted my head. "After you erased me from your lives? After you mocked my grief while I lowered my child into the ground? Tell me, David, what exactly is it you want to reconnect with? My pain? My success? Or the image of me you abandoned because it didn't fit your comfort?" He had no answer. I stood and crossed to the window, the city sprawling out beneath me. "You see, I don't need you. I survived without you. I thrived without you. But if you want to be part of my life again, there will be conditions." Rachel frowned. "Conditions?" "Yes." I turned, my voice steady. "For you, Rachel, you need to stop living like other people's lives are inconveniences to your fun. You want back in my life? Prove you can show up when it matters, not just when it's easy." Her cheeks flushed, but she nodded faintly. I faced David. "You always thought success was about money and appearances. If you want to be near me, you're going to have to confront the truth that loyalty and character are worth more than vacations and excuses. Until you learn that, you'll always be a stranger to me." His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Finally, I looked at my mother. Her hands trembled in her lap. "And you?" I said softly. "You taught me to obey or risk being cut off. Well, I was cut off and I lived. I buried my son alone because of you. If you want a place in my life now, it will only be as someone who respects me as an equal, not as a daughter you control." Tears streamed down her face. She whispered, "Emily, I don't know if I can change." "Then you don't belong here," I replied, my voice breaking only slightly. "I'm not opening wounds again for people unwilling to heal their own." I walked back to my chair and sat tall. "These are my terms. Not out of spite, but out of survival. If you want in, you change. If you don't, you walk away. I won't beg, and I won't chase. Those days are dead, buried with my son." They stared at me, the weight of my words pressing down like stone. For once, I wasn't the broken one in the room. I was the storm, and they were the ones learning to weather me. For weeks after that meeting, I wondered if they'd walk away for good. Part of me almost hoped they would, because the silence of being alone had always hurt less than the silence of being abandoned. But little by little, small cracks of change appeared. Rachel sent flowers on Michael's birthday that year. Not flashy roses, but simple white lilies, the ones I always kept in my office. She didn't add a card. She didn't need to. I knew what it meant. David called one evening, his voice awkward, halting. He admitted he'd spent years chasing money and pride, and all it left him with was emptiness. "You were right," he said quietly. "Loyalty is worth more." It wasn't a full apology, but it was the closest he'd ever come. Even my mother surprised me. She wrote me a letter in her own hand, pages of shaky words where she admitted her failings, confessed her fear of facing grief, and asked if I could ever forgive her. She didn't demand obedience. She didn't bargain. For the first time, she simply asked. And me? I stood in the middle of it all, stronger than the woman who once trembled in a black dress at a near-empty funeral. My life wasn't defined by their absence anymore. It was defined by the love I carried for my son and the empire I built from ashes. One evening, after locking in my office, I took out my grandmother's silver locket. I rubbed the word inside, endure, and pressed it against my heart. She'd been right. Life hadn't held me softly, but I had held myself. As I looked out over the glowing city, I realized something. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, and strength didn't mean solitude. It meant choosing, every day, to honor the child I lost by living fully, fiercely, unapologetically. I whispered into the night, my voice steady, "Michael, your mama endured." And with that, I walked forward, stronger, freer, and finally whole.